I want to show you a neat trick that I learned from my demonstrator when I first started stamping. It's about using a block to help tie a really nice bow or knot in your ribbon and make sure that it lays flat against your cardstock. Often when I try to tie a ribbon around a piece of cardstock without using the ribbon block, then it's hard to get it to lie flat and get my knot or my bow nice and tight and have it snug against the cardstock. Either I get it too tight or too loose and it doesn't look as good. When you do this technique, the first thing you need to do is choose your block. Now, it's lovely that we have these clear mount blocks that give us a lot of different sizes that we can work with. This is a 4 by 5 1/4 piece of cardstock, which is a typical layer on top of a card base. I'm going to need something that's 4 inches plus at least 1 to 1.5 inches longer than that in order to go around the edges of the cardstock. So the C block is just about 5.5 inches around when I put it on the block the short way. Then I'm going to add 5 or 6 inches for the knot, depending on how wide the ribbon is. To do a knot, I'm just going to show you with this piece of 3/8 inch taffeta, and I tie a square knot, which is left over right and right over left. Like so. Now I can kind of primp it and fuss with it and make sure I like the way it looks. And then what I'm going to do is turn it over and take my snips and cut right in the middle, like that. And then I'm going to be able to take those two ends and adhere them either with snail or with glue dots around the edges of the cardstock. And then I've got a knot that is snug up against my cardstock without it buckling. And then I can trim the ends of the ribbon, and there's my knot. Now if I want a bow instead of a knot, it's the same thing, only this time instead of adding 5 inches to the length that I need to go around the block, I'm going to add 10 to 12 inches. 10 is usually plenty for a narrow ribbon like this 3/8 inch taffeta, and you need 11 or 12 for 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch ribbon. And I like to cut a little long just because that gives me more room to fuss with the bow and then trim the ends. So I'm going to make a flat knot. And you can see that when I make that knot, instead of holding it like this before I make my bow, I hold the ends perpendicular. Then if you have somebody handy who can put their finger on that knot, that's really nice. But Sammy Jane, my dog, doesn't seem to be very helpful in that department. So I've learned to hold that knot with my ring finger. Then I can make a loop for my bow, wrap the other end around, pull the loop through, and there's my bow. Now it doesn't look very pretty, but that's why I use a ribbon block, because now I can adjust it and primp it and play with it until I'm really happy with the way that it looks. And when I'm finished with that, again, I'm just going to cut it in half in the back. Now, when I cut it off of the block, I try to make the cut perpendicular to the ribbon like this, so that I can tell the difference between those ends and the ends that are cut on the slant that are the ends I use to tie the bow. So once again, I would just place this around my cardstock and adhere that with snail or glue dots and then trim the ends. But what if I want a bow that's not centered on my cardstock? Let me show you how I would do that. If I'm going to use my ribbon along the length of this cardstock instead of the width, it's 5 1/4 inches long, so I'm going to need a different block. The D block has a girth of about 6 1/2 inches. That's plenty of extra to go around the edges of my 5 1/4 inch piece of cardstock. And I've added another 10 1/2 for the bow. So I make the bow the same way I did on the smaller block. And one of the things I love about Stampin' Up! Ribbons is they don't have a right and a wrong side. Both sides look the same. So I'm not having to try to twist the ribbon in order to get the right side showing in every part of my bow. So you can see how once I've got it tied, I can kind of pull on the tails and then pull on the loops until I get the knot nice and tight, and I've got it the size that I want. So if I'm going to put this on this cardstock so that the bow is over here on the side, instead of turning it over and cutting it here, I'm going to slip it off and I'm going to hold that bow about where I want it on my cardstock. So I'm going to cut this loop here just a little bit past where it crosses the edge of the cardstock. Then I can take and with glue dots or snail attach my ribbon, and I've got that bow nice and flat against my cardstock, and I can trim the edges. And if I want to anchor this bow or the knot to my cardstock, then I'm going to just pick up a glue dot with the tip of my craft knife and slip it under the bow, press down, and there it is. So I hope these tips are helpful to you and that you will try them out in your studio and see if you like the way your bows and knots come out. For more inspiration and instruction, be sure to visit my website, www.stampingmadly.com, and the Mad Stamper YouTube channel. Happy stamping!